Good evening. It's a new year, a new decade, and the news gang is here again. It has been a while. On the show tonight, goodies from the coast. But did the president finally answer the central question? The outsider on the inside, or is it the inside on the outside? The government opposition chief, William Ruto, is the DP's goose cooked, or does he hold the cooking steak? We discussed the 16 days of politics in 2020 and everything in between. Also on the show tonight, they are all back. The kicker, the memo, the punchline, the take, and the angle. But let's begin in Mombasa. There was a question that was asked to the president, why some people's names were missing from that cabinet list. We'll start with that answer right now.
Our practice throughout our history as a country has been one of pursuing the political kingdom as opposed to the economic kingdom. But it is my strong belief that that focus has been wrong. And it is for this reason that we still have remnants of poverty despite years of progress that we have made. Political power, pursued for its own sake, will not make Kenya a great nation. We must therefore use politics to shift the economy and indeed to address the plight of the most vulnerable members of our society. We need to use politics to better the livelihood of our fellow Kenyans. If we use politics as a means to a greater end, we will give politics meaning, and that is my intent for this year.
That obviously didn't sound like the answer to any question, but it's really where the president started. And Francis, you were there in Mombasa when the president was speaking, and he started with an interesting twist to the quote from Kwame Nkrumah many years ago, seek ye the political kingdom, and seek ye first the political kingdom and everything will be added unto you. But he said that we seem to have pursued this political kingdom a bit too seriously in Kenya, and that perhaps now we need to reverse things a little bit and start with the economic kingdom. What sense did you get from what the president was doing overall with that speech on the second week of 2020? From the very onset when we got to Mombasa, it was still unclear what exactly the topic of discussion would be, but with our eyes, ears, do I say even the nose wide open, you could tell something big was happening. And that includes a cabinet reshuffle, or even the exit of some cabinet ministers. That Mwangi Kiunjuri was going to exit was not a question of if, but when. And so it did not come as a surprise when that happened. But more fundamentally is the time that the president took to explain a few things on the economic front as opposed to the political front. And when he spoke about the political situation in the country, you could see his body language change. You could see some concern on his face. It was interesting that it was the last thing, you know, but you thought actually it was all over. Then he said, you know, to help make this happen, I've made a few changes in government.
First, he thanked them. He thanked them first.
Yeah, it was like a 6-point agenda.
6 intent.
Yeah, six intentions, yes. 6 key intentions. And he left what you'd say was the most critical on that briefing that day.
On the punchline.
Yeah, to the punchline, the very, very last one. Right. But it explains the kind of a situation that he finds himself in and the country at large. 16 days into the year 2020, you would think the year is very old. Why? Because the political temperatures are so high. And this is symptomatic of what we are going to experience almost the entire year. What we've seen in the last 15 days, including today the 16th day, is likely to be what you'll see the entire year for 2 reasons. There's the BBI question, and side by side, the succession question. And we will come back to all of those things about the economic measures and the agricultural interventions, mainly targeting coffee, tea, I think, and milk and all that. But I wanted us to talk a little bit about this cabinet reshuffle, and we can now get that answer to the question that the president was asked.
The ones I haven't mentioned are because they're either in place. If they're not in place, then, yeah, so be it. Kenya moves on.
Oh, wow.
So be it.
So be it.
Kenya moves on.
So be it. Kenya moves on. What happened, Linus, to just firing people and saying, ameachishwa kazi mara moja?
Kwa radio.
Yeah,
at 1 o'clock.
Keep guessing, looking through that list. Oh, where is Jamila in this? And then what happened? At some point, I remember us guessing about Adan Mohammed.
Yes,
people were wondering whether he had also been fired.
I think President Uhuru Kenyatta is stuck to his style, which is to avoid a direct way of saying that you've been fired. It should be remembered that when Echesa was dismissed as Cabinet Secretary for Sports, the president was at pains to basically say that you are fired. He actually almost got rid of the Ministry of Sports instead, just so that it goes and disappears with the person. I've never understood this kind of reservation on the part of the president. And if it were in the old times, and I think probably the constitution and the current arrangement is restraining for the current president, one would have expected the entire cabinet to be sunk. You totally dissolved the cabinet. And this was done, and then reconstitute.
Keep them waiting for about a week.
Yes. Presidents must shed their skin. You know, sorry that the only other animal that does that is a snake. He has to do that to renew things and renew his agenda and all that. He needed to have fired the entire cabinet, reconstituted. That is how the previous presidents have done. And actually, I don't know whether we can say the constitution is an impediment or it is an excuse, because we are waiting to see how, for example, the new cabinet secretaries, that is Mutahi Kagwe and Betty Maina, would be going through the confirmation hearing, because there is talk of, okay, he wouldn't dissolve the entire cabinet because that presents a new problem with his deputy, because the deputy also contributed a number of cabinet secretaries to the cabinet. It needed to have been a more courageous thing, but either way, he has addressed the one issue that he really wanted to address, which is the question of agriculture. And back to the point that was made by Francis and the issue of the political kingdom and the economic kingdom. The president is reversing Kwame Nkrumah's
logic, yes.
Logic. But it should be remembered that it is the events in the political kingdom that have prodded the president to act on the events in the economic kingdom.
So it almost seemed like what President Moi used to say, Yvonne, siasa mbaya, maisha mbaya.
Possibly. And for me, the interesting thing was, this was such a long time coming, and it's no wonder that Mwangi Kiunjuri said he saw it coming. Remember, the president had chided him publicly, not once, but 3 times, at each time in mother tongue. Like this was coming. And then there's all of the issues that have been there in the agriculture sector, particularly you remember with the Sagana meeting that they had last year, and there was the Sagana declaration, and most of the issues that were raised there by a number of those Central Kenya MPs was the economy for them, the prices of milk, coffee, tea that we've seen them uprooting. So, I mean, that was... how many times did we speculate in the newsroom? Is it going to happen this week? Is it going to happen next month? Is he finally going to let him go? And I heard a number of people saying, for Mwangi Kiunjuri to then come out and say that, he'd endured humiliation, basically. So why did he stay that long? And interestingly now, CS Peter Munya comes on board and he has this script. It's almost like he'd been serving in this ministry. He's a little different from Mukuri Atani, who's been serving in an acting capacity and therefore would just continue to implement a lot of what he's been working on. But in comes Peter Munya, and he already... So new KCC will buy milk at an increased price. He already knows exactly what to do. 230 million for locusts, you see.
Exactly.
We're moving in a more
scientific... is coming from the president itself.
That's exactly
that this is what I need you to do.
Absolutely.
Don't come up with a funny script. Here it is.
Here it is.
Go and fix it.
Yeah,
and speaking of Munya Yvonne, he said in his press conference that we don't take pictures of locusts.
Here we deal the scientific way.
As he pledges all those millions to deal with with the locust issue. But again, you mentioned something, Yvonne, that I'd like to speak about also, about the strained relationship between the president and Mwangi Kiunjuri. We've seen this coming. In fact, he had said that he had expected this to happen almost a year and a half ago when he was asked about what happened. And I kept remembering what happened in Windhoek, Namibia.
Yes.
Remember when the president was talking and he said, why isn't he taking notes?
Yes, it was him and Monica Juma.
Yes,
well?
they said, why isn't he taking notes?
Right.
Even if we're not talking about agriculture, he's a government minister, he needs to be taking notes. Then we remember the incident during the show in Nairobi, and he really spoke in mother tongue. And in fact, when he walked away, and he still
had something to say. Yes.
And then I think during Mashujaa Day in Kakamega, in Buhungu Stadium, again, the same thing happened. And there are those who would say, oh, part of the reason why he's in trouble and the reason being given for him being sacked is that the president wants CS is not to be involved in politics, so they need to be working. And Mwangi Kiunjuri has attended a couple of political meetings, but there are those on the other side.
Not the only one.
He said there are those on the other side who say Fred Matiang'i has attended.
Yes,
exactly. So it's a case of double standards. So I think it was just a matter of not if of when Mwangi Kiunjuri.
Yes, Francis.
It is important also to take into account some fundamental things. One, the choice of Peter Munya was not by accident. It was very deliberate. Why? Because Mwangi Kiunjuri and Peter Munya are very
political opposites.
Yeah, they are on the on the extreme political opposites. You remember the infamous Lamada Hotel
yes.
hotel meetings.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, Peter Munya was
there.
part of it.
And Cicely Kariuki
wasn't.
And the meetings were allegedly to discuss matters development in the Mount Kenya region. Yet, agriculture is one of the critical issues in the Mount Kenya region. So why wouldn't Kiunjuri be in that meeting discussing the Mount Kenya region? So it tells you something. So the choice was very, very deliberate. And number two, as Jamila asks, was it about his participation in political activities or his inability to run the Ministry of Agriculture, or both? If it is about politics, then there are other CSs who ought then to have gone because they have been involved in politics in one way or another. But looking at it in general context, by and large, if I look at 90% of what the president was speaking about in Mombasa, it was basically appeal to the Mount Kenya region to relax.
I would like for us to listen to what Mwangi Kiunjuri himself said when he got the news that he had been fired. Actually, he had a news conference shortly after that.
Some of you know that I've endured a lot of humiliation, and only God and my immediate family know how this made me feel.
Yes, exactly what Jamila was talking about. The president chiding him in public quite a number of times. But what question is the president answering if you were to think about it by firing Mwangi Kiunjuri? I mean, Francis, you were talking about the central part of the country being critical in what the president was trying to do with the Mombasa speech.
Absolutely. And look at the last 6 or so months, the heavy pressure that the president has come under, especially in the Mount Kenya region, has everything to do with the region's economic mainstay, agriculture. I mean, low prices of milk, 17 shillings per litre, 18 shillings, too low. And a day after Mwangi Kiunjuri exits, Peter Munya announces 33 shillings per litre.
Double.
Tells you something.
Right.
And then also the amount of money being sent to KCC to buy that milk, another 587 million shillings to construct 2 factories in Nyeri and Nyahururu.
Yeah.
And money to buy rice, I mean, reforms at KTDA, reforms at the coffee sector. In fact, a 30 days order for the 3 billion shillings cherry fund to be implemented. So basically he was trying to answer questions relating to his region. And it was obviously going to be very difficult for the president to go to the Mount Kenya region on this BBI familiarization tour without having answered those fundamental questions that people were asking him. And quite a number of MPs from the Mount Kenya region, especially those who are allied to the deputy president, have bravely told him that he has abandoned the region. I mean, remember the Moses Kuria statement, and several others have said we still have issues that remain unresolved. And even the choice of Mutahi Kagwe, he's from Nyeri. You're replacing somebody from Laikipia County, originally from Nyeri County. You replace him with somebody from the same locality. So it tells you a lot of things.
And just to add, Mutahi Kagwe was the MC at the Sagana meeting. So there's, you know, there's all of these things that you see. Yes.
And even then, Yvonne, even in those meetings, you will hear subtle remarks. Na rais ukipata nafasi upatie huyu kijana yetu, you know.
Right,
so you could tell it was coming from quite some
but I think also what has Linus, 1 minute, with what the president talked about tea. I keep seeing the images of farmers uprooting their tea bushes, angry because of the fact that Soko Lukweme and Chini, they were unable to actually continue with tea farming, considering that tea has been grown in that area for a very, very, very long time. Coffee, of course, milk and mpungama, rice and potatoes, and bananas. It's all good news for them. So I think for the president, and Safishia Njia in that, the next time he goes to Central, he gets that nice reception that all those issues you guys were talking about, Noisy Medil nice too. And yet you mentioned about Munya now and the fact that him and Kiunjuri are total opposites. Reminds me of the fact that now the ministry that Munya has taken over has an added portfolio, which is cooperatives, which means sasa hiyo wizara ya kilimo iko na mamlaka zaidi. Sasa kuna input na kuna output. All of it in one ministry, which is now agriculture. It has a long name now. It's now agriculture, fisheries, livestock and cooperatives, a ministry with 4 principal secretaries. One of the most powerful. You have not even
spoken about the number of parastatals in that ministry.
Yes, cooperatives.
Very many.
But Joe, I want to talk a bit about the economy, because it shouldn't be reduced to a Central Kenya question. It is actually a national dilemma right now, only that it projects itself more severely in Central Kenya, because we all know very well over the years since independence, when we talk of the leading export, cash crops, you're thinking tea and you're thinking coffee, and you know that is Central Kenya. The fact that the national economy has not been performing under the leadership of President Uhuru Kenyatta has affected his base also indirectly. Because even these benefits that we're talking about, it would be misleading to think that the prices of milk have gone up in Central Kenya. A Kilgoris milk farmer will actually be selling for the same price that have been announced by the minister. And because if you look at the previous president, Mwai Kibaki, it's not like he was hanging out with Central Kenya people, out roasting maize with them in the villages. He never really appeared there, but he had a functioning economy that was working very well, and people were working, and he only spoke about work, work, and work, and the economy was doing well. If the economy of the country was performing, I do not think the Central Kenya leaders, the political base that has put President Uhuru Kenyatta in a lot of trouble, would have had the moral authority or a pedestal to be able to hold him hostage the way they have been able to. It is because of the non-performing national economy.
But that said, I agree with you totally, Linus. But I think what the president is dealing with here is a political problem. I mean, the irony of it being the fact that he's saying, well, now let us focus on the economic kingdom. The problem that the president has is a political problem. Why he is trying to push, for example, this BBI agenda, and is at loggerheads on that with his deputy president, who seems to have made inroads in that very Central Kenya. And in Central Kenya, there is always this interesting nexus between the economy and politics in a very direct way, a lot more perhaps than other places. Perhaps for the reason that you say that they are more on the cutting edge of the modern economy, as it were, and therefore they feel the pinch almost immediately and they feel it hard. So I think what has happened is that the president is dealing with a situation where he needs to somehow appease this constituency if he's to push with whatever he sees as a critical part of his legacy, which is to get this BBI thing moving. For as long as there is a lot of political noise within his own Jubilee base, the noise in the Jubilee base, you'll notice, is louder actually with the people that once supported the president. You know, you're talking about people like Alice Wahome, Ndindi Nyoro, Kimani Ichung'wah.
And where are they getting their strength?
And all of this.
They're getting their strength.
And that is what I'm coming to. And they find a real reason to actually complain. Why? Because the economy generally is not doing well, but they can find that grievance a bit more present in central Kenya because of how heavily invested most of the residents there are in this economy that we're calling the national economy.
But his critics in central, Joe, the likes of Alice Wahome, Moses Kuria as well, what they've done is to take these economic grievances and wear it like a suicide vest to get the president to move on the economic issues. That is why you've seen the president is taking so much, because in terms of the optics, you can't be seen as a president to use national offices to fix regional issues.
Yep.
You're not appointing a minister for agriculture for central Kenya. Munya is the minister for agriculture for the Republic of Kenya. So the team that has been using politics, the political kingdom, the political tactics to push him on the economic front have achieved quite so much and pushed him to act in the way he has.
And I agree regarding the economy and that now being sort of weaponized, and perhaps rightfully so. But he did really address a lot of issues, not just in the agriculture sector. I mean, he talked about 10 billion shillings to be lent to micro and small enterprises. I guess what has tended to happen in this administration is to boost one area, give with one hand and take with another. So you're giving 10 billion shillings to MSMEs, but there's also the turnover tax that's being, imposed on them, hitting the very same MSMEs as well. I mean, he addressed issues of the creative economy. There was a number of issues, taking a look at corruption. He talked about 5.2 billion shillings for relief food supplies. I mean, I'm just taking a look at a number of these issues that he has put in place besides agriculture. But also a point to note that perhaps particularly in the agricultural sector, that throwing money at the problem is not necessarily the solution. I mean, the conversation I had earlier on my show and speaking with a food security expert saying this 500 million that we're buying excess milk, we're buying excess rice. I mean, we still import 90% of the rice that this country uses, consumes, in this country, and that a lot of this, and I've heard this year in, year out, including from people who advise the president on food security, that what is needed in this country is an agricultural transformative strategy, and that is yet to happen. So whether we see some of these things actually, sorting out the issues in the economy, and also to note that he did give, the issue that 70% of the pending bills have been paid out, and so wait to see.
And by the way, did you say that
need to take a break too.
Even the farmers in this country are net buyers? Net buyers.
They also go to the market to buy food.
They can't even produce enough
food for themselves. And we're spending $1.7 billion.
That's food for thought as we take a break. News Gang will be right back.